It started with a leak, a single line buried inside a classified cable, but powerful enough to shake a nation. Traoré has 24 hours to deliver 90% of the oil and gold or face consequences. The signature at the bottom, Donald J. Trump, the former U.S. president, now leading an aggressive global business offensive through private diplomatic channels, had made a demand that stunned even Washington insiders. He wanted near total control of Burkina Faso's newly discovered oil and strategic gold reserves. No negotiation, no diplomacy, just an ultimatum. It wasn't just a message, it was a threat, and it was delivered straight to the heart of Ouagadougou. According to insiders, the cable came through a trusted intermediary, a former U.S. military attaché, escorted by private American security contractors. It landed on Traoré's desk at dawn. The wording was clear: allow us corporations to immediately begin oil extraction and gold export operations. Sign over long-term control of Burkina Faso energy policy to an American-led economic board. Do it within 24 hours or risk sanctions, resource blockades and internal sabotage. Trump's message wasn't veiled in diplomacy. It was raw, ruthless, transactional. We saved you from terrorism. Now pay us back. But what Trump didn't count on was the man sitting on the other side of that letter. Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't blink. He called in his intelligence chief, he called in his army commander, and then he looked them both in the eye and said, "Tell the Americans. Burkina Faso is not for sale." By midday, the leak had gone viral. African networks broke the story. Screens lit up from Lagos to Kinshasa. Trump demands African resources. Traoré given 24-hour deadline. The world watched. Burkina Faso held its breath, and Captain Traoré began to write his response, not with ink, but with steel. For months, it was one of the best-kept secrets in Africa, buried deep beneath the arid plains of northern Burkina Faso, something that could change everything: oil, not rumors, not speculation, but confirmed massive untouched reserves. The discovery was made by a classified geological team operating under a joint military energy division set up quietly by Captain Traoré after seizing power. Russian engineers had helped conduct deep ground scans. Iranian survey drones had flown under radar coverage. North Korean tech teams had encrypted the data. Everything was sealed. Everything was locked down until it wasn't, because the moment the first underground drill broke surface, satellites saw it: American satellites, French satellites, eyes in the sky that never sleep. Within 48 hours, US intelligence agencies flagged anomalous energy activity in the Sahel. They traced shipments of industrial equipment arriving from Iran and Venezuela. They intercepted encrypted messages referencing a new sovereign petroleum corridor, and then the gold trails lit up too. Burkina Faso had already begun quietly reclaiming its gold mines, pushing out French-controlled corporations and replacing them with state-led military protection. The revenue was no longer heading to Paris. It was going straight to a Burkina Faso development fund. The US knew what this meant: a country with oil and gold, not owned by Wall Street, not controlled by Paris, not begging the IMF, but defended by rifles and flags. That wasn't just a threat, it was an example, and that's what scared them. They didn't just want the resources. They wanted to stop the model from spreading before Mali, Niger, Chad, or Congo followed suit. That's when the calls started from Exxon, from Chevron, from Washington, all asking the same question: how do we shut this down before it becomes another Libya? But this time, African-owned the answer came quickly. Send Trump, send the threat and force Traoré to bow, but the man they were pressuring doesn't kneel. When the message arrived in Ouagadougou, it wasn't dressed in diplomacy. It came wrapped in arrogance, the language of empire disguised as business. Trump's team delivered it like a business deal. But make no mistake, this wasn't negotiation. It was extortion. The demands were outlined in a 7-page document marked Confidential Strategic Resource Acquisition Framework. But the content was anything but subtle. 90% of Burkina Faso's oil production was to be granted to US oil giants for stabilization and infrastructure purposes. Control of all major old export routes was to be handed over to us, approved intermediaries. An American advisory committee would oversee all new mining contracts and revenue distribution, and in exchange promises of military security cooperation, technology partnerships, and protection from regime change. Yes, you read that right, protection from regime change, a veiled threat buried beneath polite wording, the message, obey us or fall, and at the top of the document, in thick red ink, one handwritten note, Traoré has 24 hours. DJT, it wasn't just economic colonialism, it was imperialism, 2.0, bold, naked and direct. Washington elites tried to distance themselves. They claimed Trump was acting privately, outside official government policy. But behind the scenes, the White House wasn't stopping him, because Trump was doing what they all wanted, just louder. He was saying what the West had always whispered: we don't care who runs Africa, as long as we own what's under it. But Traoré had already read the message, and he had already decided, no foreign hand will decide the fate of our soil. Because if this was a game of power, he was ready to play, but not as a pawn, as a sovereign man with a sovereign nation and Trump. He had just threatened the wrong soldier. The message from Trump landed with a thud in the presidential war room, but Traoré didn't even flinch. He read it once, then again, then he pushed it aside and stood up, calm, steady, cold as steel. So that's their price for peace, he said, slavery in a suit and tie. His generals waited, his ministers stayed silent, and then Captain Ibrahim Traoré made his decision, not with hesitation, but with fire. They want 90% of our future. They'll get 100% of our resistance. He didn't call Paris. He didn't call Washington. He called the commander of Burkina Faso Special Sovereignty Force, a unit created in secret. Just for this moment, orders were issued: lock down every oil field, double the guards on every gold convoy, shut down all data transfers to foreign contractors, prepare the national media, a statement was coming. By midday, the entire country was watching. The screen faded to black, then the camera flickered on, no fancy background, no polished speech, just Traoré in his uniform, one hand resting on a Bouchabé flag, the other on a folder marked confidential as threat. His voice was calm. His eyes ruthless: to the people of Burkina Faso and to the nations of Africa, an offer has been made to sell our oil, to sell our gold, to sell our honor, in exchange for fear. He paused. To those behind this insult, to Mr. Trump and his backers, you have misjudged us. We are not Libya. We are not Iraq. We are not your playground. The room was silent. We will never trade our land for your luxury. We will never bow to your bullets or your banks. You gave us 24 hours. Here is our response. You have 24 hours to take your greed, your threats, and your arrogance and leave African soil. He stood, saluted, and walked away. No questions, no negotiations, just a line in the sand drawn with courage and conviction, and from that moment forward, Africa knew it had a warrior who would not kneel while Traoré's words echoed across Africa. Another storm was brewing, one the world couldn't see behind the scenes in glass towers and shadowy boardrooms. Panic set in at ExxonMobil, calls were made to Washington. At Halliburton, strategy teams scrambled, and inside Langley, Virginia headquarters of the CIA, red alarms were flashing. Traoré didn't fold. He went public. We've got a problem. This wasn't just about Burkina Faso anymore. This was about a dangerous precedent, a sovereign African leader backed by military power, defying the Western economic system and surviving, and worse, being celebrated for it. So the pressure campaign intensified. CIA operatives increased their presence in West Africa. Surveillance drones flew tighter patterns over Burkina, oil and gold corridors. Fake social media accounts launched whisper campaigns against Traoré, calling him unstable, extreme, even mentally unfit. Private contractors from a notorious intelligence firm were reportedly spotted near the Ghana border. Their mission: destabilization from within. Meanwhile, major Western media networks suddenly aligned in message, began a new narrative. Burkina Faso's economic isolation could trigger a humanitarian crisis. Experts warned Traoré is leading his country into ruin, but inside Burkina Faso, the opposite was happening. More people lined up to volunteer for oil field security units. University students held teach INS on sovereignty and resource justice. Women's groups delivered food and supplies to soldiers guarding gold mines. And every time a hit piece aired on CNN or BBC, Burkina youth just laughed and reposted it with the caption, "If they hate him this much, he must be doing something right." Traoré knew the enemy wasn't just Trump. It was the system, the global network of banks, oil firms, intelligence agencies, and media empires that had looted Africa for a century, and now that machine was turning its full weight against one man because he had done the unthinkable. He said no and meant it. Burkina Faso was under siege, politically, economically and digitally. But Captain Ibrahim Traoré was not alone. Just days after his defiant rejection of Trump's demand, 3 military planes touched down in Ouagadougou. They carried no bombs, no weapons, just brothers from Mali came. Colonel Assimi Goïta, silent but firm. From Niger, General Abdourahmane Chani, face set with fire. From Guinea, Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, walking tall with zero apologies. They entered the presidential chamber together, no ties, no handlers, no foreign flags, and when they emerged, they stood at Traoré's side for the world to see. Then came the words that sent tremors across the continent. "If you touch Burkina Faso, you touch all of us." It wasn't just rhetoric. It was a doctrine, the Sahel's answer to NATO, the AES shield. Within 24 hours, the 3 nations activated joint intelligence units. AES drones began patrols across Burkina's borders. Encrypted communications were shared between mining sites and allied command posts. The alliance was no longer theoretical. It was operational. Mali offered combat-tested advisors to defend oil installations. Niger provided desert logistics teams. Guinea pledged airspace clearance for any emergency supply routes. And they didn't stop there. AES media outlets launched a counter-narrative blitz, exposing Western manipulation, highlighting African resistance, and flooding the internet with one message: our resources, our future, our fight across the region. People rallied in Bamako. Protests erupted in support of Traoré in Conakry. Murals were painted of him standing on oil drums with the Bouchard Bay flag held high. Even in Chad and the Central African Republic, youth began chanting, "AES or death." The West scrambled to respond, but their intelligence agencies had failed to predict one thing. This was not just about Burkina Faso. This was a pan-African firewall, and Traoré wasn't retreating. He was marching forward, backed by a brotherhood forged not in treaties, but in war, betrayal and the shared dream of true African freedom. While Western powers fumed and plotted, 2 global giants were already moving quietly, strategically and without apology. China and Russia had entered the room, but not through loud threats or colonial arrogance. They came bearing tools, technology, and a message Traoré would never forget: you are not alone. Within 72 hours of the Trump ultimatum going public, a discreet Chinese delegation arrived in Ouagadougou. No press, no drama, just engineers, diplomats, and one bold offer: oil refining infrastructure designed, delivered, and built in 90 days. Gold valuation systems that eliminate Western banks from the transaction chain and, most importantly, a currency bypass system using China's digital yuan, cutting out the CFA franc and the dollar completely. Burkina Faso wouldn't just keep its oil and gold, it would control every stage of its value chain, and the Russians, they weren't far behind. The next day, a Russian Ilyushin military jet landed at a secure base near Ouagadougou. It offloaded 2 things: advanced electronic warfare equipment and dozens of unmarked crates labeled specialized defense assets. Translation: Burkina Faso's oil fields were now under the protection of Russian-grade anti-drone systems. Sources revealed that Wagner-affiliated specialists had been redeployed, not as mercenaries, but as strategic instructors, embedding directly into Burkina Bay defense units. And the best part, all of it, every deal, every radar system, every handshake, was done without a single IMF loan, no debt, no lectures, just sovereignty. For sovereignty, the West was rattled. CNN called it a dangerous axis of support. The State Department accused Traoré of selling out to dictatorships, but the African people didn't care, because in Traoré, they saw a leader who didn't bow. In China and Russia, they saw tools to fight back, and in AES, they saw a future without chains. The chessboard had shifted. Trump made his move, but now Traoré had two powerful players on his side, and the empire's playbook was falling apart by now. Traoré had done the unthinkable. He had defied a US ultimatum, exposed a global power play, and rallied China, Russia, and half of West Africa behind him, and in America, the media exploded. CNN flashed red banners. Burkina Faso threatens our strategic interests. Traoré aligns with Russia and China. Fox News went further. Traoré must be stopped. African strongman threatens Western energy security. Every panel was packed, former CIA agents, oil executives, retired generals, all repeating one word like a drumbeat: dangerous. They painted Traoré as a madman, an extremist, a puppet of Putin, a new Gaddafi, but with tic-tac. But on social media, they couldn't stop him. The hashtags began trending worldwide. José Traoré the Lion, Africa is not for sale. We're all Burkina African creators flooded Instagram and YouTube with videos praising Traoré's courage. Even black Americans began joining the wave. This man just told Trump over my dead body and lived to say it out loud. This is what real leadership looks like, pay attention. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, the youth made their message clear. They took clips of CNN's fear-mongering and remixed them into protest songs. They wore T-shirts that read, "If CNN hates you, you're doing something right." Traoré was no longer just a national leader. He was a symbol, a lightning rod, a meme, a message, a movement. Even Time magazine couldn't ignore it. Their next digital cover, "The Man America Can't Bully Inside Traoré, African Uprising." But with fame came danger. The more visible Traoré became, the more threats emerged. Private intelligence firms ramped up digital attacks. Bots flooded social platforms with fake rumors. Whispers of regime change resurfaced in DC back rooms, but it didn't matter because the people had seen the game and Traoré had broken the script. He wasn't supposed to fight back. He wasn't supposed to survive, and he sure wasn't supposed to go viral yet. Here he was, a 35-year-old soldier from Ouagadougou, trending harder than any Western president, armed with nothing but truth, grit, and oil. The clock was ticking second by second. The world watched. Would Traoré back down? Would he call Washington? Would he open the gates to US oil giants and beg for forgiveness? No. Instead, when the 24-hour deadline expired, Traoré doubled down. In the early hours of the morning, the National Assembly of Burkina Faso held an emergency vote, one kept completely secret from outside observers. By unanimous decision and under direct orders from the presidency, they passed a landmark resolution. All oil and gold reserves within Bucha Bay territory are hereby nationalized and permanently shielded from all foreign corporate ownership. The ink dried, the decree was signed, and within hours, every Western company still operating in the country received a clear notice. Pack your bags. You're done here. Gold mining licenses held by French and Canadian firms were revoked. A US-backed energy survey team was escorted to the border, and all foreign diplomatic envoys were informed. Burkina Faso's resources are not up for discussion. They are the property of its people. Then came the broadcast. Traoré appeared on national television, not in military fatigues, but in traditional Burkina attire, calm, grounded, unshaken. "We have been exploited for generations," he said. "And now that we discover our wealth, they want it back, but I am not here to serve empires. I am here to serve a people who have suffered too long." He paused, then added, "Burkina Faso is not afraid, and I am not negotiating with thieves outside." The streets erupted with celebration, drums, fireworks, dancers in the capital chanting. He said no. He said no. He said no. Online, the energy surged again. Young Africans posted videos holding fuel, soil and coins, whispering, "We protect what is ours." Trump's deadline had passed. The threat had failed, and Traoré he hadn't just survived the storm. Time he'd rewritten the rules of the game. For 12 hours after Traoré's declaration, Washington went silent. No press release, no tweets, just whispers in military briefings and panic in oil boardrooms. Then at exactly 7:42 a.m. Eastern Time, it came a single tweet from Donald J. Trump in all caps, Traoré just made the biggest mistake of his life. Africa will pay for this. The internet exploded. Journalists scrambled for reaction. Pundits shouted over each other on cable news. Markets in New York wobbled as traders braced for escalation, but in Ouagadougou, Traoré was unmoved when his advisors showed him the tweet. He reportedly laughed and said, "That's the sound of an empire losing control." Yet behind the scenes, the threat was real. Satellite activity over West Africa tripled. The U.S. Navy moved 2 ships closer to the Gulf of Guinea, and AFRICOM quietly issued a bulletin warning of regional volatility. Burkina Faso's military went on full alert. Anti-air systems were activated, gold routes were locked down, and elite special forces units were deployed around oil sites and the capital. AES allies responded instantly. Mali sent armored vehicles across the border. Niger repositioned air defense radar to cover shared skies. Guinea announced a joint rapid response pact, pledging direct retaliation for any act of foreign aggression against Burkina Faso. Then something unexpected happened across Africa. Citizens, not governments, took action in Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Senegal. 1,000 rallied in front of U.S. embassies. They weren't just protesting. They were daring the empire to try. Signs read, "Touch Traoré and you touch us all." Africa is not your minefield. Keep your democracy. We'll keep our dignity back in Washington. Trump was reportedly furious that his threats weren't working. And the final blow, a video posted by Traoré, just 43 seconds long, went viral globally. He looked directly into the camera and said, "This is not just about oil, this is not just about gold. This is about the soul of Africa, and I would rather die standing than live kneeling." The video was reposted 12 million times in under 24 hours. Even former African presidents began breaking silence, calling Traoré the beginning of a new generation. The world held its breath, but Africa began to breathe again.